Your existence is an impossible paradox to solve. The universe needed a conscious being to observe it before it could create that observer. Baruch Hashem, so many people enjoyed this video and came to me, some in person, some online, and they said, Doc, can you go ahead and make an explanatory video? Because there's so many dense topics here you put together in such a short amount of time. I want more explanation. So I said, okay. So here I am, not as scripted, no scripting, this is off the cuff, took off the jacket, and we'll see how it goes. This is a new format. The delayed choice quantum eraser demonstrated the mechanism that would allow an observation to retroactively determine whether the Big Bang produced an actual cosmos or remained in a quantum superposition. This week's Parsha of Bereshis encodes what physicists call the strong anthropic principle. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack over there. The delayed choice quantum eraser is a controversial subject. Even now I was sent a video by someone else and looking at other interpretations. And I said in the previous video a few weeks ago that there's still much argument over what are the philosophical implications of it. But the background behind all this is that there was a physicist named John Wheeler, and he was the PhD advisor at Princeton for Richard Feynman, who is one of the most famous physicists known within the physics and science community, but not as well known outside the community. He has a lot of books. He's a character. He got the Nobel Prize for quantum electrodynamics. And in one of his books, he talks very highly about John Wheeler. So John Wheeler has thought a lot about quantum mechanics and proposed this idea, and him and others wrote it up. They came up with this idea called the anthropic principle, and there's a strong version and a weak version. The weak anthropic principle essentially says the way things are the way they are is because we're here to observe them. Meaning, if you look around, it looks like the world has been fine-tuned for us. There's 26 fundamental constants. If you just look at where the Earth's position is, the ability for life to even exist on Earth, we don't think almost any other planets in the galaxy or universe, potentially, for sure not in the solar system, don't seem to harbor life, at least not in a mainstream way. That is known or verified. Most places look very inhospitable in the universe, and the Earth seems to be special. So some say, okay, that shows you proof or a strong argument for a God, for a creator. And so the weak anthropic principle says that, well, there's a bias there. If you have let's say you have 1 trillion planets, there's way more, but let's say you have 1 trillion planets, and the probability is 1 out of 1 trillion that the odds will be that there will be life. So the beings or the life that it exists on that planet that came to be from whatever processes, biological, evolution, etc., that they'll think there's something special about them. But in reality, it was just they were very lucky. Someone was bound to have life. But then there's something called the strong anthropic principle, which states something even stronger. And it took me some time to get comfortable with it. Even after I became religious, I was not comfortable with this idea for some time, which is that the universe had to eventually create life in order to create a conscious observer to look back at the beginning and retroactively create the whole universe. So that's what we're talking about here. And then John Wheeler proposed this idea, and there you'll see later in the video, there's a diagram, looks like a U, like the Big Bang forms an eye, and then the eye looks back. The eye being representative of the conscious observer. And from there, he proposed this experiment called the delayed choice quantum eraser to see if causality could be violated. Because you really need, that's what essentially saying is that the future can affect the past. Now this gets complicated because it depends if you look at quantum mechanics through the Copenhagen interpretation, which is the most popular one, which is that you don't have intrinsic properties until they're measured, versus the Bohmian mechanics, which, at least on a non-relativistic standpoint, matches the same outputs. When Nutt says that there's something called hidden variables, and it's only the active measurement that messes them up, that makes it look like there's uncertainty. Big debate, a lot of conversation beyond the scope of this. Gave you enough information to go ahead and look it up yourself. So that's where we're holding here, is that's why the delete choice quantum eraser was proposed and eventually was found in 1999, published in 2000, and subsequently been reproduced since then. So that's a little background. Creation and consciousness are locked in a causality dilemma, each requiring the other to exist first. That's what I was just saying, that the future affects the past affects the future. It's like the chicken and egg, kind of, but more complicated. The chicken and egg has a solution, by the way. Do you know what the answer is? Write it in the comments if you think you know the answer. Pause the video and write in the comments. The chicken come first or the egg? So what's the answer? The egg came first. Why? Because when the chickens, or if you want to say it was another species that formed the chicken, the process in which the male seed and the egg come together and different chromosomes come together, it's the egg that forms the chicken. Like that process that happened in meiosis is actually the first of that species. Whereas you don't need a chicken to make the egg, but you need the egg to make the chicken. Okay, weiter. Write in the comments if you disagree with me. It's good for the algorithm. They like comments. So, which came first? A universe that birthed observers, or an observer that brought the universe into reality? The people say they love the AI. Also, let me know in the comments if you like the AI. If you want to know how I make it, let me know. It's a whole process, but it takes some time. But Baruch Hashem, I'm hoping you guys are enjoying it. Lubavitcher Rebbe revealed why we proclaim today is the birthday of the world. So this is in the Rosh Hashanah Musaf service. That's when in the Musaf service is the additional prayer, because that corresponds back in the temple days. They had offerings each day, and on the holidays and Shabbos, there was an additional Musaf, also Yosef. Musaf Sof means adding on, additional. So during the Musaf service, during the meter, the shofar is blown. And after the shofar is blown, we say Hayom Salam. Today's the anniversary of the creation of the world. But it doesn't mean creation. The word bara means to create. So this is a classic question. If Adam was born, Adam Rishon, the first man, was born on Aleph Tishrei, on the first day, on Rosh Hashanah, but he was created on the sixth day, right? We know from Bereshis, from Genesis. How can you say Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of the world? Classic question. So the Rebbe is coming to give his answer. On Rosh Hashanah, instead of the 25th of Elul, I wrote these really fast. Just for those who want to read the Hebrew, they would pause it. It says B'Shem Rabbi Eliezer, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, B'Kaf Hei B'Elul, and the 25th of Elul, Nivra Ha'olam, the world is created. Vek Rabbah 29-1. So it says right there, the world is created in why 25th Elul, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and then 1. So Adam is on the first. You go back to 25th Elul. So you see the problem? So what's the solution? When time began. The Rebbe said, through the creation of man, Hashem established a new definition of existence. Without it, there's more to that. And then he said, I just had to cut it down for brevity. And according to this new definition, it's as if the world did not exist before, because the whole world was created for, why was the whole world created? Why does Hashem keep creating us every moment, something from nothing? Why? Just for what? To go to sports games and to hang out? No. Brought down in Tanya chapter 36, quoted in the Midrash, Tanchum Manasseh 16, that Hashem had a desire to make a dwelling for him in the lowest worlds. He wants us to make a dwelling for him in the lowest worlds. Hashem has a desire that he wants a dwelling in the lowest worlds. And that dwelling, I'm not going to spend so much time over here about it, but that I have other places as well. I talk about it more. But that dwelling is us doing mitzvahs, physical mitzvahs, in a place where his light is not revealed. And that's dependent on us. Actually, I'm going to get to a little bit later in the video, now I'm thinking about it. But that's why he keeps creating the world. So without man, what's the point? versus science is like, well, man's insignificant. What do we matter? Although now there's more science coming talking about how important consciousness, not how important, how fundamental consciousness is. And that maybe there is something to what religion is saying. But for a long time, science was like, man, we just happen to be here. We're just sort of an accident of evolution, and we just happen to be the smartest creature on the block, but we're still animals, and we don't really matter, right? Like we don't really matter, just whatever. And the world is much bigger and more vast, and the universe even more so. So we're not that significant. But the Rebbe is saying, no, the whole creation of the world from 25th of Elul to Rosh Hashanah, the Rosh Hashanah culminates that. And once man comes on the scene, like there's a whole new definition of existence. And that's so far ahead of his time, because that's what the strong anthropic principle is saying. And the Rebbe said this in 1972. And this is around the same time, by the way, the anthropic principle was starting to like come about and gain steam. And this idea of Wheeler came out just a few years later. So I think that's very interesting in the 70s, whatever was going on spiritually in the 70s, alluding to that. Divine soul, to recognize it, the world so I added that aspect that it's a divine soul from the quantum perspective would be a conscious observer. So I'm using the two a little interchangeably, because free will really comes from the divine soul, from Judaism's point of view. As a meaningful reality simply did not exist. This is echoed by the paradigm-shifting idea that physicist John A. Wheeler postulated, where observation... So this is what I was talking about. Let me rewind it. So this diagram, he drew it, not that little dot in the middle. I put this into AI, to my AI video generator, and I had it took a few attempts. It didn't like come right away. And the idea is that you have the Big Bang. I don't know if you see my cursor, but the Big Bang started here. You had eons and eons of evolution, galactic evolution. And then eventually the whatever processes the biologists claim, or whatever happens, forms life and then forms consciousness. So like an ant is not conscious, probably. And this is a dog, is a baby? Interesting questions. But we are. Human beings are conscious, and we can go ahead and see, once we come on the scene, now we look back, and now we cause our own birth. But the whole idea is not birth in that way, but the whole universe existed in a state of potential, in a state of what we call kayach in Hebrew. And only once an observation was made, it goes from kayach to poil, goes from potential to actual. With an age of 0 seconds, with 13.8 billion years of history. You see this with electrons. You make an observation on an electron. According to the Copenhagen interpretation, you have caused the electron to collapse from many different possible states it was in into one place where it is now. You make your measurement and where it is and where it's going. And the electron has just come into being now, even though it had all these potential paths that existed in the past. You've created them, and whatever path it took, whichever path it was retroactively, you created it then with its history going back, which is really cool because it's, you're in the world, but you're like sort of accessing something that's beyond space-time. I think it's cool. Like, what? You're creating the past now. Observation gives tangible reality to the universe back to the beginning. Adam's consciousness on day. That was cool, right? I wanted it to stay there. I wanted it to show the evolution of like early galaxies and later galaxies as it went down. But at some point, AI is great, but at some point it's still, can only do so much at this point. So I only had so much patience. It's still pretty cool, right? I think so. Leave a comment below. I know it's getting annoying, but it really does help. So help me out. And if you click the share button and the like button, consciousness on day 6 retroactively created the prior 5 days. So that's an extrapolation I'm making, essentially, but it's in line with everything. I'm combining everything together. Created in God's image, we inherited this power to actualize reality through observation. I think that's just awesome. Like, we're made in God's image, so that's why it's like that, like, because God is the one that can bring things into being. So he has the power, Yishma Kos Rega, like to bring something from nothing every moment. But he shares that power with us through at least through the quantum mechanical perspective of bringing something into being, not in the same way he does, but there's a glimmer, as like in Hebrew, there's things like there's lashon hara and there's avak lashon hara, or there's given ribis and avak ribis. There's idea of you do something wrong, or then there's like the dust of doing something wrong. It's like it's similar to it. It's kind of there. It's not exactly lashon hara, but it feels like lashon hara. It's like you feel like a little dirty afterwards, So there's examples of this, or ribis. You're not given interest, but the way that like the business arrangement is done, it's set up. Like it feels like you're getting interest, so there's different times in halacha where it's allowed and where it's not allowed, depending on details. I'm not going to get to here for different things, but so this is a positive way. Hashem creates everything, but he gave us a little power to like create through observation, which is connected through our divine soul. I think it's awesome. But this reveals an even deeper paradox. Why would Hashem bind the fate of his own cosmic plan to the choices of finite beings that depend on him? That's called being vulnerable. So for a long time, people said vulnerability is a chazan, is a negativity. So more modern psychology in this more past decade or two, people are like, no, be vulnerable. So Hashem himself, who's beyond limitation, can also become vulnerable. Like that's the ultimate. Like we depend on him, but then he can start to make his divine plan, which stems from his essence, depend on us, at least on our avoda and our free will, and us doing mitzvahs. And that's a deep relationship there, It's not just some king sitting far away, and we're like all the way back here, like, yes, oh Lord, King, yes. No, it's much more intimate than that. Chapter 33 of Tanya states, the purpose of every person is to make a home for Hashem. Thank you for our sponsors. I have a sponsorship down below. A lot of people like to sponsor Torah classes. Feel free to sponsor, whether it's for a loved one, a yard site, a company, help out the channel and get your name out there. And then you have something to share. It's not just like sharing, your sponsored class that, 10, 20, 30 people listen to. Here you have hundreds and many, some of my videos have thousands of views as of right now. It'll be fun to look at this later on. And now you have a link you can always share, in memory of your loved one. So feel free to reach out below. There's a form or just message me. In the lowest realm, this essential desire transcends reality itself. So essentially saying is chapter 33 of Tanya calls it Adam, which is one of the 12 psukim, 12 passages that the Rebbe put out. It's the 12 fundamental passages, says that the whole purpose of like why all creatures are here, and us especially, is to create a dwelling for God in the lowest realms. A dwelling that dira, meaning that we're connected, like I said before, I'll reiterate it, we are connecting to his essence through performing mitzvahs. And this world is created from his essence every moment, something from nothing. Because that's the only true, as in Hebrew we say metzius, the only true existence is Hashem's essence. Everything else is an extension of that. And only physicality, only us and physical things, like, a spindrift has become very popular since Winn-Dixie closed, and they have it in Publix now. So like this can, like, it exists, right? My hand can't go where it is, or whatever, any object that's around me, a popsicle stick, right? Like it can't exist where I am at the same time. I'm a yeshus and it's a yeshus. It's its own existence. So we feel like we exist independent of God. That's a power from his essence. So physicality is so deeply rooted in his essence. That's why all the mitzvahs are physical. At least one of the reasons explained in Chassidus. And then he wants us to do mitzvahs on our own free will in a place. That's what tachtonim is. Like since his light is not revealed here, it's free will. We're not being, it's not like there's a gun to someone's head, God forbid, because that's not a meaningful relationship. So that was his desire. So that's not just that that's his desire, but we're so connected to that that's why God not only brought us into the world, but continues to bring us to the world. Yishma quotes for Rega. Every moment something from nothing. Like I was saying prayers of Shema. We're going to get to in a moment. So we say it every morning. Even though the blessings of Shema remind us that Hashem's essence recreates the world every instant from nothingness, He bound His essential plan's fulfillment to our mitzvah performance. While we are dependent on Him for our existence, He chose to become dependent on our free will to culminate His ultimate purpose of creation. Make sense? Rewind if it didn't, but I hope it makes sense. Message me. I'm happy to send you some more about it. I have a different video on Yoni Katz's channel. I delve into it more. This core spiritual paradox is the source of the physical one. Someone said, how can you say that? I said, fine. I should say, Rabbi Yossi Winner, if you're listening, I should say it seems that one can make the argument that that's the source. The manifestation of the universe requires an observer because Hashem desires a meaningful relationship with us in order to complete His cosmic production. So Rabbi Winner pointed out something that I thought about, but I didn't want to mention it. I didn't have the time. And he says to me, how can you compare and say that the fact that we create the universe creates us, that's in the system, whereas Hashem is outside the system. And Hashem's relationship with us, that's an outside-inside system, and that's inside-inside. So you see, so it was a very keen observation, so I'm giving you a public shout out. And I told him that really the spiritual source, the connection I was trying to make was more about interdependency rather than inside-outside system. But then I had long voice notes back and forth with him. At hours we both should have been sleeping, and and we spoke about. I was telling him that there's this idea, and I mentioned it briefly before, that consciousness seems to be more fundamental and seemingly outside space-time. Things like near-death experiences and ability to remote view, all bunch of different things I'm not going to get into here. But there's a lot of research on consciousness, and it seems to be not a product of material evolution in any way, shape, or form, but rather seems to be outside of it. And there's lots and lots of evidence. Department of Virginia has 60 plus years of evidence of papers, and there's just a lot. And it's become a thing that consciousness, professors like Donald Bren at UC Irvine, and others talk about this, that consciousness seems to be in this world, but out of it, that it's more of the underlying underpinnings. And that also John Wheeler, and something else he proposed was something called it from bit, which is that stuff comes from information. And this actually seems to be in alignment with Tanya Sheikhud V'Emunah chapter 7, and briefly mentioned in Likutei Amarim chapter 48, that the Alter Rebbe says that Hashem creates things by knowing them, which is cool. But so just a quick aside, before Einstein, so let's go back to 1905, his miracle year of physics, where he had four very big papers, 4 or 5. People just thought matter, just stuff that was fundamental. And Einstein comes and says, no, E equals mc squared, energy is equal to mass times speed light squared. Energy is really fundamental. And then comes quantum mechanics, 20s, 30s, 40s. Then you get into quantum fields in the 50s and 60s, approximately. So Richard Feynman has quantum electrodynamics, quantum field theory. So then it's quantum fields, and also just regular fields. There's 17 or so fundamental fields. It's a more abstract concept, but you have like a force carrier. You have something that interacts with the fields that causes forces to occur beyond the scope of this video. And then you started getting this idea of information being fundamental. And then you had back maybe like 20 years ago, 10, 20, 30, called it from qubit. They took it from bit, made it from qubit. that it's quantum information and quantum stuff is fundamental. And now there's more of a shift towards consciousness, which is much more aligned with Judaism, information and consciousness, because consciousness is a grand consciousness. We're all united is God, right? Einon Ravada, there's nothing but him. Shem Elokeinu Shem Echad, it's all one. And you have something like Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Hashem's four-letter name, that can interact as well, be both Das Elyon, above, and then come in to us Das Tachnun, the lower knowledge, versus the upper knowledge. And there's sort of a way to bridge them and go back and forth without violating free will, where causality looks like it's violated here, but it's not really, because it depends on your vantage point. There's a lot of cool things to discuss in this field. So sorry for the tangent, but I just wanted to bring this up here in this regard. How can internalizing this insight so that's why I told to Rabbi Winter, was that there's so much more to talk about. So here it is. Here's some of the more explanation, and tell me what if you want a new video on something else. Just thinking about connecting a Parsha video to one of these concepts. Let me know which one, if any, tickles your fancy. I don't know where that phrase comes from, but I haven't heard it used in a while. We should bring it back. From your soul's personal mission, when you place a coin in a charity box, you perform a quantum-like measurement on... People love that visual. That short did really well. And on Instagram, got like 3 times the views of my next one. Like 2,500 views. That's a lot for me. My next one was like a few hundred. 800 and then a few hundred. In reality, the Tzemach Tzedek review. Okay, a little behind the scenes. That transition I had to do was because it produces 8-second videos, but sometimes I only need like 4 or 5 seconds and just does weird stuff or does something that's not related. So I did a second one and then I just merged the two. Little behind the scenes, if you made it this long throughout the video. That means you're one of my super fans. It's great to see you. Sign up for the newsletter because I'm soon going to write one. I promise. Spleenetter. And I'm working on the preview for the upcoming Torah and Science book. Deals in this commentary, which you'll get if you sign up for the newsletter. Bava Basra 9 for free. Jews love things for free. And B, that your final coin does not just complete the sum. It retroactively elevates all previous donations into one powerful act. That was Hashgacha Pratis. So around the same time I was working on that there's an appendix in Siman Chaf Aleph, Epistle 21 of Igeres HaKadosh from the Alter Rebbe from Intanyam, and it talks about that commentary. And Hasidic Heritage Series years ago they made a whole bunch of little books, and one of them was on that. I was trying to find, was it a mimer? Where's the source? And it was a commentary. But it's a really cool idea that the whole question came from giving tzedakah. The Alter Rebbe is trying to get people to give every week, every month, give on a regular basis. Who's sending money to the Holy Land, to Eretz HaKodesh, and they're very struggling very much. And so Alter Rebbe was like, you need to keep giving, even if you cut it up and give less. And they were like, but then he started debating and discussing, but every time you give, you're drawing down a spiritual energy. So if you give more, you get more spiritual energy, right? So trying to just wait and once a year give you a whole lump sum. And then they bring in Rambam that says, well, when essentially a hand that gives becomes a giving hand, which makes sense. You should give, thank God, minimum I give 3 times a day. When I wake up, and then before Shachris and before Mincha. I used to give before Mariv, but there's a whole letter from the Rebbe about it, and others that Kabbalistically it's better not to give at night unless someone asks you directly, but just to put into a pushka, you're feeding the klipos. Anyway, so the Tzemach Tzedek has this whole resolution where he says that if you give your $1 each day, and after, let's say give $1 3 times a day. So after a year, it's approximately $1,000. So each level of 10 is somehow more spiritual energy. And this is from my memory. I read it years ago. So it says if what happens is at the end of the year, your whole accounting is done, your cheshbon is done from above. So let's say you gave the $1,000 for the year. Because you gave $1 each time added up, it's as if the spiritual energy is as if you gave $1,000 1,000 times. I know, right? So I was like, wow, what a perfect way to tie all this in. Because you want to have an actionable message to take home, not just only an abstract thing. That's one of the differences of Yiddishkeit, especially Chassidus versus just sciences. Like you play with abstract information, which is very cool and interesting, but Maisi wa Iker, like the main action is the main thing. So like, what can you take home from this? This is the quantum erasers. I do love this graphic. She might get embarrassed if I mention it. Spiritual blueprint. Present actions alter what you accomplished in the past. Each dollar donated fulfills Hashem's desire that predates existence. As the Talmud states in Psalm 198, redemption will only come through charity. The revelation of his essence in the Messianic era waits for you to actualize it with one conscious mitzvah at a time. Not gonna lie, AI helped me with that ending. Connected, because like help me connect the earlier part to the later part. So one conscious mitzvah is that each mitzvah, you do enough mitzvahs, it tips the scales. So it's like, oh, one conscious mitzvah. I'm like, oh. That was cute. I don't know if it's just me. I'm just talking to myself. I'm just talking to a camera. I don't know who's gonna watch this. Could be 10 of you. It could be 1,000 of you. It could be 10,000. Could go viral. Wouldn't that be funny if this went viral? Yeah. What are the odds? I don't know. All right, we're almost done. The rest is just an ad. So the idea that so the idea is that Mashiach, when Mashiach comes, that you'll get a revelation of the essence of God versus a revelation of the light of God. I still don't fully get that concept. You know, like a revelation itself. I always, in the past, I connected revelation to mean light. I don't fully get the concept, because for me in the past, I always thought revelation meant light. But I've been told by others that it's something different. Like you can have a revelation of the essence, which is not the light being there. I don't really fully get it, but it is mentioned in Chassidus that when Mashiach comes, we're not talking about the light will be seen. It's that the essence will be revealed. But I think it's going to be both. I'm not sure. If you know more, let me know. These are confusing topics, but they're so interesting to talk about, to think about, to bring about. That's for bring. And I think I'm pretty much done. So if you like that, if you like this type of video style, let me know. Leave a comment, share, like, subscribe, tell your friends, the whole thing. And don't just watch a video and like click off, because it actually hurts the algorithm. It helps because the algorithm, like it's such a funky thing, but it looks at which viewers have watched their other videos before, how much they've watched, if they're watching this one more than other ones, if they're sharing it. If you click the share button itself, it records it that another video is like the video has been shared more often. So this video had my most shares of any video. It had 45 shares in like the first 800 or 1,000 views, which was really high. Usually I might get like 30 is a high number. So I think that's one of the reasons that it spread more. It looks at the likes. There's a bunch of you that are not subscribed that are sharing and liking my video, like two to 3 dozen of you. I don't know who you are, but if you could just click that subscribe button, it'll help. So it's right there. It used to be red, now it's black. Okay, sign up for the newsletter, and I hope this helped clear things up. And if not, write in the comments, and I'm happy to explain on something more. For me, I've thought about these so much that it's more second nature to me. But so I apologize if I say something I'm like it's obvious to me and it's not to you. I try not to, but I'm only human. And sei gesund, and I'll see you next time.